Imagine a life lived entirely on a sickbed,
Yeah.
just plagued by chronic illness and excruciating pain, yet somehow becoming this powerful, radiant beacon of spiritual light, a source of transformation for countless souls.
It sounds almost impossible, doesn't it?
It really does. How could such profound suffering, a cross that most of us would probably shrink from, how could that be the very crucible of extraordinary grace, not just for personal holiness, but actually overflowing for other people?
It's one of those deep paradoxes of the Christian life, isn't it? To be so physically constrained, appearing so, well, vulnerable, yet radiating this immense spiritual influence. People are drawn in like to a living spring.
Yeah, it really speaks volumes about an interior connection with God that just transcends all those earthly limitations.
Absolutely, a deep wellspring.
And that's precisely the profound journey we're embarking on today. We're doing a deep dive into the remarkable life of Venerable Anita Cantieri.
Ah, yes, an Italian Catholic mystic and a distinguished member of the Secular Order of Discalced Carmelites, the OCDS.
Exactly. And our mission today is really to unpack the rich, often kind of hidden tapestry of Anita's mystical experiences. We want to put them in context, within the Carmelite tradition.
And understand how her very unique circumstances, being a laywoman confined by this chronic, debilitating illness, how that became not a hindrance, but the actual path to heroic virtue.
And as the church itself has recognized, a literal fountain of grace for others. It's incredible.
Her story offers such a compelling and I think very accessible example of holiness for every one of us, really, especially perhaps for devout Catholics seeking to live their faith authentically amidst all the challenges of daily life.
Right. Her quiet life of love, suffering, and silence. It really shows us that sanctity isn't just for the grand stages or the solemn quiet of the cloister.
No, and it's not dependent on perfect health or worldly success either. It's a testament, really, to the power of a radical yes to God's will, whatever the circumstances might be.
And what a yes it was. Her life, though it spanned a mere 32 years. Just think about that. Only 32 years.
So brief, really.
It was so spiritually profound, so surrendered to God, that the Holy See recognized her as venerable. And that's a huge step towards sainthood, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It's the Church officially recognizing her heroic practice of Christian virtues. A very significant declaration.
So to really grasp the essence of this beautiful soul, someone who achieves such, extraordinary spiritual beauty, we'll be drawing from quite a range of sources.
Yes. There are rich biographical accounts, some insightful theological analyses.
And maybe most importantly, deeply personal insights from her own writings, her letters, and also the moving testimonies of people whose lives she actually touched and transformed.
It promises to be a fascinating exploration. So where should we begin? Right at the start of her journey, perhaps.
Let's do that. Let's start at the very beginning. Anita Cantieri was born on March 30th, 1910 in Lucca, Italy. A beautiful city. She came from incredibly modest means. She was actually the 11th of 12 children born to Divino and Annunziata Cantieri.
Wow, 12 children. You can just imagine the household, can't you? The vibrancy, the daily hustle, but also the deep family bonds in early 20th century Italy.
Absolutely. A constant rhythm of work, prayer, community, all shaping young Anita.
And it was in that environment, described as a fine Catholic home, that her deep spiritual foundation was laid. Very naturally, very firmly.
Her parents, though humble, clearly prioritized faith. She was baptized just days after her birth, April 3rd, 1910.
Welcomed immediately into the church, and her confirmation followed not long after, relatively speaking, October 3rd, 1915, strengthening her with the Holy Spirit.
And her first communion was May 7, 1916. Which seems quite young for the time, actually. It speaks to maybe an early eagerness for the Eucharist.
It certainly suggests that. These foundational sacraments received in a loving, faith-filled home, they clearly nurtured a soul already leaning towards God, preparing her for what was to come.
What's truly remarkable, though, even for that devout upbringing, is that by the age of 12, just 12,
So young.
she felt this distinct, powerful call to consecrate herself entirely to God. She was actively aspiring to a religious life.
That's an extraordinary level of spiritual maturity for a child, really. A clear sense of vocation setting her apart.
It is, and she didn't just feel it, she acted on it, pursuing this with real fervor. At 20 years old, on May 24th, 1930, she entered the Carmelite Sisters of St. Teresa in Campi Bisenzio, near Florence.
She entered as a postulant, which, for listeners, is basically the first step, a kind of probationary period in a religious order. You live the life, see if it fits, discern if it's God's call.
So this was her dream, her deeply cherished desire, to give himself fully to God within, the quiet walls of a convent.
But tragically, her time there was very brief.
Yeah, only about 14 or 15 months. By August 1931, she had to leave.
The reasons given were persistent physical ailments. Later accounts specify chronic fevers, an intestinal disorder, things that just made convent life impossible for her then.
So she returned home. Undoubtedly heartbroken, you'd imagine, but still hoping, maybe clinging to the hope, that her health would improve enough for her to go back.
You can almost feel the spiritual anguish, can't you?
Yeah.
Thinking you know God's will and then having it seemingly snatched away by illness.
But this is where her story takes that really pivotal turn. It reveals her immense spiritual resilience. Because her health didn't improve.
No, it got significantly worse. By age 24, around 1934, the accounts say she was almost continuously confined to bed, enduring excruciating suffering.
So the dream as a traditional cloistered life, with all its physical demands, it was irrevocably fading away.
Yet it was right there in that crucible of physical limitation that she found a new, profound clarity, a different path.
Right, she had to rediscern, didn't she? To ask, okay, if that wasn't God's will in the way I thought, what is his will for me now?
And that's where her surrender just shines. She recognized that a cloistered life, physically speaking, wasn't God's plan A for her, but she didn't despair. She didn't give up her call to consecration.
Instead, she embraced this different, equally valid, and ultimately incredibly heroic path within the broader Carmelite family.
It wasn't resignation out of defeat. It was an active, faith-filled embrace of a new, completely unforeseen way of living out her vocation.
And what a path it turned out to be. On July 1st, 1935, at age 25, she was welcomed into the Carmelite Secular Third Order.
Which we now know as the Secular Order of Discalced Carmelites, or OCDS.
This adaptation, this flexibility in her commitment, it's just a powerful testament to her spiritual resilience, her unwavering commitment to God's will, even when it hurt, even when it wasn't what she first thought.
Absolutely. Her illness, which looked like a barrier, actually became integral to her unique path to holiness. It wasn't an obstacle despite God's will, but somehow part of his will for her.
And this new path, this acceptance, came with a profoundly significant new name, Thérèse of the Child Jesus, Teresa di Gesù Bambino in Italian.
And that choice was absolutely deliberate. It wasn't random. It explicitly aligned her with Saint Thérèse of Lisieux.
The little flower, yeah.
Yeah.
A contemporary Carmelite saint only canonized about 10 years earlier in 1925.
Exactly. And Saint Thérèse was renowned for her little way, achieving holiness through humility, simple acts of love, accepting daily sufferings.
Transforming them into offerings for Christ to the Church.
Precisely. So by choosing that name, Anita was signaling her deep understanding of her own life's path. She was essentially saying, this is my program, I'm going to emulate Thérèsian spirituality.
It's like she was framing her suffering not just as a burden, but as a positive, redemptive offering, right in line with the little way.
It was a clear declaration of her spiritual constitution, her intention to seek holiness from that bed of suffering, a really foundational choice.
Which leads us right into the heart of her journey. How exactly does one live the intense Carmelite charism from a sickbed? Maybe we should clarify what the Secular Order of Discalced Carmelites, the OCDS, actually is.
Good idea. It's the integral lay branch of the Carmelite order. So it includes laypersons married, single, and also secular clergy like diocesan priests.
And just for clarity, it's important we distinguish OCDS, the Carmelite order, from OCD, obsessive-compulsive disorder. Completely different things.
Absolutely crucial distinction, yes. So the OCDS vocation calls its members to strive for evangelical perfection within their particular state of life.
So not in a convent or monastery necessarily.
Right. They integrate Carmelite spirituality into their everyday lives. They live out the evangelical counsels, chastity, poverty, obedience, not through formal vows like religious, but through commitments appropriate to their secular state, all inspired by the Beatitudes.
And during Anita's time, there was actually a framework for this, wasn't there?
Yes, very important. The Manual of the Third Secular Order was approved by the Holy See in 1921. It provided a standardized global framework for being a secular Carmelite.
Which means she wasn't just making it up as she went along. She was stepping into a defined, church-approved tradition.
Exactly. It moved beyond earlier, sometimes varied local practices. It gave her a clear roadmap for her spiritual formation and daily life, even in her unique situation.
So what are the core principles of this OCDS charism?
It really revolves around living in allegiance to Jesus Christ through a deep personal friendship with him, an intimate relationship.
Walking with him daily.
Yes. And this is lived under the patronage of Our Lady of Mount Carmel, very central to Carmelite identity, and drawing inspiration from the great Carmelite mystics, St. Teresa of Avila and St. John of the Cross.
And there are specific daily disciplines involved too, right? Practices that structure this life.
Definitely central. They commit to at least half an hour of silent mental prayer each day, that interior conversation with God.
That's significant. Half an hour of silence daily.
It is. Plus participation in the Liturgy of the Hours, especially morning and evening prayer, uniting them with the Church's universal prayer. Night prayer is encouraged too.
And spiritual reading.
Diligent spiritual reading, yes, especially Carmelite saints, and regular monthly community meetings for fraternity and support. And of course, the visible sign is wearing the brown scapular.
A symbol of consecration to Mary and commitment to the Carmelite way.
Right. The whole essence is to embody Carmelite spirituality within their secular state, practicing charity in daily life, not just imitating monks.
And Anita Cantieri's life just became this profound embodiment of that charism, didn't it? Even from her sickbed. Maybe especially from her sickbed.
It really was a living testament. It demonstrated how authentic contemplation is an interior state, not dependent on external activity or health.
And she had that motto program she articulated. Amare, Batire, Taisir.
Love, suffer, be silent. All this is my life synthesized. Such a concise and powerful summary.
It really encapsulates Carmelite ideals, doesn't it? Intense interior love, redemptive suffering, humble silence before God.
And she lived it. Sources say she kept silent about her own pain, no complaints. She only spoke to praise God or encourage others.
Her life was characterized by innocence, love, and suffering, and she consciously dedicated herself to sharing the sufferings of Jesus crucified for the salvation of others.
That wasn't passive endurance, it was active co-redemption. She saw her suffering as having immense value when united to Christ's.
And she literally transformed her sick room. She saw it as her cloister.
Her iron hospital bed as her humble cell, like a nun's cell in a monastery, and her constant pain as her daily mortification for Christ.
She actually wrote, "Nothing is truly lacking, neither the cloister, nor the cell, nor mortification." I mean, the perspective is just astounding.
It really is. Her physical immobility, rather than hindering her, intensified her interior life. It forced her deeper into God's presence within her soul.
It really shows that contemplation is about the heart, not the location or physical ability.
Precisely. Her limitations underscored the supernatural source of her strength and her union with God. And at the heart of it all were her devotions.
Yes, that deep union with Jesus on the cross, embracing his suffering.
A fervent love for him in the Blessed Sacrament, which sustained her, and profound devotion to Mary wearing the scapular faithfully.
You mentioned the Eucharist. There's that story, isn't there, from before she was completely bedridden.
Yes, a nun who prayed with her at adoration recalled Anita looked like an angel when she was before the Blessed Sacrament. Just motionless, eyes fixed on the monstrance, totally absorbed.
And even later, confined to bed, unable to go to daily Mass.
She united herself spiritually, offering her sufferings in union with the sacrifice happening on altars everywhere, a powerful example of spiritual communion.
And all of this flowed from, or maybe led to, her complete surrender to divine will.
Yes, a radical surrender, not passive acceptance, but an active embrace. Her constant prayer was, Veni, Domine, come, Lord.
Come into my soul, come at the end of time.
Both, yes. And she often said, I feed on the will of God. That wasn't just a pious phrase, it was her fundamental orientation.
She even wrote, I love Carmel with a pressing love, but more than that, I love my Lord's will. That really shows her priorities.
God's will above all else. Her unwavering yes, no matter how painful or unexpected.
Which brings us, inevitably, to the crucible of her suffering. It was immense, wasn't it? And multifaceted.
Truly immense. From age 24, confined to bed almost continuously with excruciating suffering. Later details reveal a serious heart crisis in 1938, an abscess needing surgery in 41.
And towards the end, it was even worse. Complications from peritonitis, an abdominal tumor, and generalized tuberculosis ravaging her body.
And it wasn't just physical torment, brutal as that was. She also experienced significant moral distress.
What did that involve?
Well, there were painful conflicts involving her parish and a local monastery of Passionist nuns. These external issues led to her being unjustly accused, misunderstood, even slandered.
Oh, wow. So bearing that kind of spiritual anguish, the pain of injustice on top of the physical agony.
Exactly. It added another layer of spiritual purification to her slow martyrdom, making it incredibly complete.
And yet her embrace of all this pain, physical and moral, was heroic.
Nothing short of heroic. She refused to complain. Never a word of self-pity.
And astonishingly, she declined anesthesia during 2 tumor surgeries.
Yes. Consciously choosing to bear the pain in union with Jesus on the cross, she actually said, "Jesus is so good to me in letting me participate in the sufferings of the cross."
That's just breathtaking faith.
And she practiced voluntary asceticism too. Small things like delaying a drink on a hot day, eating whatever was served without comment. Not forced, but flowing from love. Extraordinary self-mastery.
Now, from a mystical perspective, how does her suffering connect with, say, classical Carmelite mysticism, like St. John of the Cross?
That's a crucial point. An Italian source explicitly states Anita had to traverse also a notte oscura, very painful.
The Dark Night.
Exactly. Which she passed in faith and love, letting herself be guided by obedience. The dark night of the soul, as described by St. John of the Cross, is that profound, often excruciating stage where God seems absent, purifying the soul.
So this confirms it wasn't just physical struggle, it was a deep spiritual trial, refining her soul, drawing her deeper into God.
Absolutely. And central to it all was her union with Jesus on the cross. She saw her suffering not as meaningless, but as a privileged way to share in his suffering for the salvation of others.
She truly saw herself as a co-redeemer with Christ.
This idea of redemptive suffering is core Catholic spirituality. She explicitly offered her relentless pain as a slow and continual martyrdom for the Church, for sinners, transforming agony into selfless charity.
Even amidst the worst pain, she could exclaim, "Deo gratias, thanks be to God," and genuinely smile.
Yes. Grateful for the chance to share in Christ's cross. It's an astounding level of heroic virtue. Deeply inspiring for us as Catholics trying to follow Christ in our own struggles.
Now, when we talk about her mysticism, it's interesting. While her life is described as having extraordinary spiritual beauty, and she was believed to have supernatural gifts,
Yes.
the publicly available summaries don't really detail explicit visions or locutions of those interior voices or ecstasies, not specific to Anita anyway.
That suggests her mysticism was perhaps more characterized by that profound interior transformation, an intimate union with God forged through suffering.
Like an ecstasy of the heart, maybe, rather than outward phenomena.
Possibly. And the Church, in her beatification process, really emphasized her heroic practice of virtues, how she lived her faith in that deep interior union with God. That's the essence of sanctity.
Though the fact that supernatural gifts were believed to be part of her recognized holiness is significant in itself.
It is. Even if the details aren't widely publicized, it points to a deep, hidden spiritual life, known intimately to God and her spiritual directors.
And despite her extreme physical condition, being confined for so many years, she left behind writings, didn't she? And maintained correspondence.
She did. These primary sources are invaluable. They give us a direct window into her soul and show her active apostolate from that sickbed. She wasn't just passive.
What kind of writings are we talking about?
Well, there are her Esercizi Spirituali, spiritual exercises, records from January and June 1936, described as a small book but full of spiritual richness and that joy that comes from trusting and complete abandonment to the divine will.
Doing a spiritual retreat from bed and recording joy-filled reflections on abandonment. Remarkable.
Isn't it? She also kept a small spiritual notebook, Pensieri e Ricordi, thoughts and memories, likely her intimate journal.
And Il Testamento, her spiritual will.
Exactly. A final message distilling her ideals of total surrender and love for Jesus. It includes her prayer, Veni Domine, and that powerful statement, I feed on the will of God.
And crucially, she corresponded with her spiritual director.
Yes, Padre N. Flamini. Those letters are key. In Catholic mysticism, spiritual direction is paramount for discernment. Her letters show she was guided and imply validation by the Church.
They must be a treasure trove, revealing her journey navigating suffering and mystical experiences under guidance.
Absolutely, and she showed incredible wisdom herself. She even advised her director on guiding a young woman preparing for marriage, stressing the confessor's role, saying something like, to the confessor, it seems a particular light is given to judge without human intentions.
Wow, she was a spiritual guide from her sickbed. She also wrote letters to a friend, didn't she?
Yes, to Sig Annetta, described as a beautiful testimony of how the Lord intervenes in human relationships when he finds abandonment and prayer, showing a deep spiritual sisterhood, filled with encouragement and insights into her prayer life.
It shows how her spiritual depth turned even friendships into vehicles of grace, extending her apostolate through letters.
And here's something surprising. She also expressed herself through creative writing.
Oh, what did she write?
Together with a friend, Leda Gazzelli, She wrote a short religious play about St. Agnes.
St. Agnes, the early Christian virgin martyr. That makes sense. A young girl, steadfast in faith.
Exactly. It must have resonated deeply with Anita's own desire for total consecration.
And the opening lines of that play are apparently quite poignant.
Incredibly so, knowing Anita's story. They mirror her own longing for the religious vows she couldn't take, her intense desire for God. She wrote through Agnes, "Oh, when will it be granted to me to bind myself with an irrevocable and solemn vow to my God? Each day of waiting is a new day of suffering. By now, my whole living is Christ."
Wow. Written from her sick room, reflecting her own experience of wanting to give herself completely, finding her whole existence in Christ, even in suffering.
It truly resonates. The play ends with a prayer for St. Agnes to guide young souls, which feels like Anita's own plea for her contemporaries. It shows her creativity wasn't limited by her confinement.
Which leads us to her absolutely incredible apostolate from the sickbed, despite being reduced to immobility.
Unable to move herself.
She transformed that bed into this vibrant center of spiritual activity, a living example of the apostolate of suffering.
Where personal pain, offered to God, becomes a source of grace and evangelization. It's astonishing.
She became a promoter and animator of numerous parishes and apostolic initiatives from her bed.
Think about it. In 1937, she joined Catholic Action, a major lay movement, and quickly became the soul of the movement locally, initiating spiritual exercises, meetings, formation weeks for young women, all from her bed.
It wasn't passive leadership. She was actively directing parish life without leaving her room.
And she kept close ties with the diocesan center. Leaders sought her advice, recognizing her wisdom.
She also supported vocations and missions, like St. Thérèse.
Ardently, praying and sacrificing for priests and religious, dedicating herself to the missions. She wrote, "I would like to rush into the midst of souls, to bring them the knowledge of Jesus." Her physical weakness only highlighted the supernatural source of her zeal.
Her spiritual depth truly made her a fountain of grace for all who came near her.
Yes. People visited to console her, but left feeling comforted, counseled, and encouraged themselves.
Towards the end, there was a constant stream of visitors, drawn by her spiritual radiance.
Exactly. Her room became an unofficial oratory, a place of prayer, of encounter with God through her.
And she was known to impart genuine spiritual favors.
Peace of heart, renewed strength, a desire for holiness, a deeper longing for God. It's believed she continues this intercession from heaven, welcomes you even now with the same smile and the same love.
And the testimonies around her death are striking too, about conversions.
Very much so. Witnesses attested that after visiting her, they felt unexplained peace or renewed commitment to the sacraments. And immediately after her death, reports circulated of numerous people returning to confession and communion because of her prayers. A spiritual miracle of conversion.
Her physical limits didn't diminish her apostolate. They transformed it into this unique, powerful spiritual motherhood.
A profound instrument of conversion for Christ.
What an astonishing legacy, built so quietly from that sickbed.
Which brings us to her enduring legacy, from Santina to Venerable and the ongoing path to sainthood.
Even during her lifetime, people saw her holiness. They affectionately called her a Santina, a little saint.
That popular recognition is often the first sign, isn't it? It is. And after her death, countless people immediately began praying to her, seeking her intercession. Her tomb in Lucca became a place of pilgrimage. This spontaneous devotion is key.
And the Church's process for canonization is rigorous, designed for objectivity.
Absolutely. Minimum 5 years after death. Requires fama sanctitatis, that widespread conviction of holiness, and fama signorum, evidence her intercession is effective, that prayers are answered.
And the big step is the Decree on Heroic Virtue, which grants the title Venerable.
Right. That's the Church officially recognizing the individual lived Christian virtues, faith, hope, charity, prudence, justice, fortitude, temperance, to an exceptional heroic degree, a deep assessment.
And Anita's path to Venerable was relatively steady.
Quite steady, yes. The diocesan process started in 1954, just 12 years after her death, which is quick. It concluded in 56. The cause moved to Rome in 1977.
And then the key moment.
December 21st, 1991. Pope John Paul II promulgated the decree on her heroic virtue, formally recognizing her as Venerable Anita Cantieri, validating her sanctity after rigorous investigation.
So what's her current status now? She's venerable.
Which means she awaits beatification. To be declared blessed, the next stage typically requires a verified miracle attributed to her intercession, usually a physical healing science can't explain.
And then a second miracle for canonization, to be declared a saint.
Correct. While specific miracles for beatification haven't been officially promulgated yet, there are general mentions of grazie ricevuti, graces received.
And that ongoing belief that she imparts spiritual favors, peace, strength, desire for holiness.
Yes, and that's crucial. It aligns with the Fama Signorum, showing her intercession is seen as effective by the faithful. It keeps her cause moving forward.
And devotion to her continues, especially in Carmelite circles and Lucca.
It persists and grows. She's sometimes nicknamed the Skylark of Carmel.
That's such a beautiful image. Her spirit soaring even while her body was confined.
It captures her essence perfectly. Prayer cards, devotional art, local commemorations, they all show her growing impact.
She continues to inspire, especially those suffering illness or disability.
Immensely. Modern writers even playfully call her a modern-day superhero for her heroic attitude to suffering. Her courage resonates today.
Her life is just such a compelling illustration of that apostolate of suffering.
And a powerful model of sanctity achievable within the secular state, within ordinary, sometimes painful lives, showing how suffering, embraced with faith and love, becomes union with God and grace for others.
Her influence truly extends far beyond her short life, reaching across time, drawing people to God.
It's a testament to God's power being made perfect in weakness, as St. Paul says.
So we've explored this incredible, almost unimaginable journey of Venerable Anita Cantieri, just 32 years old, a life marked by immense suffering, yet becoming this radiant testament to spiritual beauty and apostolic zeal.
From her humble sickbed, living her little way as a secular Carmelite, embracing that motto to love, suffer, be silent, she shows us the transformative power of a radical yes to God's will.
No matter how difficult or unexpected that will seems.
Exactly. And her story is such a powerful reminder for you, our listener. Mystical holiness, true sanctity, it's not reserved for the cloister or for priests or for the perfectly healthy.
It can blossom right where you are.
Yes, it can radiate and become a fountain of grace in the heart of any devout Catholic who offers their life, their pains, disappointments, love to God, her endurance, her Deo gratias in agony, her unwavering faith.
They show how every challenge can be transformed into an act of charity, a source of grace, a path to deeper union with Christ.
Absolutely.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, maybe consider Venerable Anita's hidden life of love and suffering. What hidden apostolate of suffering might God be quietly calling you to embrace in your own life's challenges? Physical, moral, whatever they may be.
How might your yes to his will, your patient endurance, your unseen acts of love become a fountain of grace for others around you and for the whole church?
Her story really invites us to find profound purpose and redemptive power in every single aspect of our lives, doesn't it? Transforming our personal struggles into a source of light and sanctity for the world.